I knew the shape of her letters before I ever knew the sound of her voice. The way she crossed her T's low, almost shy. The little loop she put on her Y's like she couldn't help being hopeful. I could have picked her handwriting out of 1,000 strangers. And the morning her note wasn't there, I stood at that row of mailboxes with my heart pounding like something had gone wrong in the world, because for a man who hadn't let anyone close in 2 years, that empty little slot felt like a door slamming shut. That was the morning I understood I'd fallen for a woman I had never once seen face to face. Let me back up, because none of this makes sense without the beginning. My name is Theo Brandt. I was 32 when this happened, and if you'd met me back then, you would have described me as fine, which is the word people use when there's nothing obviously wrong with you, and nothing obviously alive in you either. I'd spent 4 years as a sound engineer for a recording studio downtown, the kind of job where you sit in a dark room and make other people's voices sound better than they really are. I was good at it. I was good at a lot of things that kept me alone in dark rooms. 2 years before the note started, my younger brother Caleb died. Motorcycle, wet road, a guardrail that did exactly what guardrails are supposed to do, and still wasn't enough. He was 26. He was the loud one, the one who filled silences I didn't even know needed filling until he wasn't there to fill them anymore. After the funeral, I did what quiet people do with grief. I folded it up small, put it somewhere I wouldn't have to look at it, and got very, very efficient at being unbothered. When my grandmother passed a year later and left me her old building, a 4-unit brick walk-up on Linden Street with crooked stairs and radiators that knocked like they were trying to send a message, I moved into. Manage it. 3 other tenants, a leaky roof, and me. It was perfect, honestly. Nobody asked me how I was doing. Nobody expected me to be the loud one. I could disappear into the maintenance and the rent ledgers and the comfortable rhythm of being needed for small things and nothing more. The building had one of those old communal mail areas in the entry hall. 4 brass boxes set into the wall, and beneath them a wide ledge where the carrier dropped packages. My box was the second one, Box 2. T. Brandt, written on a strip of masking tape, in my own bad handwriting. The first note showed up on a Tuesday, in March. It wasn't in my mailbox exactly. It was tucked under the corner of my box, folded once, my number written on the outside. 2. Just the number. I almost threw it out, figured it was a flyer or a complaint about the recycling bins. Instead, I unfolded it standing there in the cold hallway, and it said, "You left your headlights on. I knocked, but you didn't answer. Hope I caught it in time. Your neighbor, in 4. That was it. Unit 4 was the top floor, the corner unit, the one tenant I'd somehow never actually met. My grandmother had handled the lease before she got sick. The rent came as a money order every month. On time, no problems, no complaints. I knew there was a woman up there. I'd heard a piano sometimes. Late, soft, the kind of playing someone does for themselves and no one else. But I had never put a face to Unit 4. I went out and checked. My headlights were off, my battery fine. She had caught it in time. A small thing, a nothing thing. But here's what I keep coming back to. I read that note 4 times. 4. Because it had been a long time since anyone had knocked on my door for any reason at all, and even longer since anyone had bothered when I didn't answer. I wrote back, "I don't fully know why. I'm not a note writer, but I found a pen and a torn piece of grocery receipt," and I wrote, "Thanks. Saved me a dead battery and a worse Tuesday. Theo, Unit 2. And I slid it under her box on my way out. The next morning, there was a reply. Worse Tuesdays should be illegal. I voted on it. The motion failed. 4. I laughed. Out loud. Alone in a freezing hallway at 6 in the morning. I hadn't done that in I don't know how long, and the sound of it surprised me so much I actually looked around to make sure no one had heard. And that's how it started. We never set out to make it a routine. It just became one, the way the best things in your life usually arrive sideways, unannounced, dressed up as something small. Every morning there'd be a note from her tucked under my box. Every evening I'd leave one under hers. We were 2 people who, for reasons neither of us explained at first, found it easier to talk on paper than to talk at all. Her notes were never long. A line, 2, at most. But they had this quality to them, like she noticed things other people walked right past. The old man in 1 feeds a crow every morning. He pretends he's just throwing out bread. The crow brings him bottle caps. I think they're friends, and neither will admit it. Heard you playing music through the floor last night. The sad kind. For the record, you have good taste in being sad. I repotted a plant today that everyone told me was dead. It wasn't dead. It was just waiting for someone to stop expecting so much of it. Felt relevant. Didn't know who to tell. I started looking forward to mornings, which, "If you knew me then" was a small miracle. I'd lie in bed and wonder what would be under the box. I'd catch myself smiling at the ledger, at the grocery store, at red lights. My coworker Priya, the studio's booking manager, asked me one afternoon if I'd met someone, and I said no so fast that she raised both eyebrows and let it drop with a look that said she absolutely did not believe me. The thing is, I hadn't met someone. Not really. I'd met handwriting, and I'd started memorizing it without meaning to. The way she made her capital I with two little serifs like a tiny iron beam. The way her question marks leaned forward like they were genuinely curious about the answer. The way she pressed harder on the words that mattered, so the ink went dark and certain right when she was being honest. I knew her writing the way you know a song you didn't decide to learn. It just got into you. What I didn't know was her name. It went on like that for almost 2 months before I asked the obvious thing. I'd been holding back, and I think you'll understand why in a second. There's a strange intimacy in talking to someone you've never seen. You can be braver, you can be more honest. You're not managing your face or your voice or whether you said the wrong thing. It's just the truth, on paper, and then it's gone into a brass box. I was afraid that if we met, the whole delicate thing would collapse under the weight of two ordinary people standing in a hallway not knowing what to do with their hands. But one evening I wrote, "This is going to sound insane after 2 months, but I don't actually know your name. I've been telling myself stories about the woman in 4. Figure she should at least have a name in them." The next morning her note was folded, smaller than usual, like she'd thought about it for a while. "Iris, and for the record I know yours. Theo, it's on the masking tape on your box. I've read it about 300 times. Don't let that go to your head. Iris." I said it out loud in the hallway. Iris. It fit the handwriting. It fit the woman who noticed crows and dead plants that weren't dead. I wrote back, "Iris in 4. Now my stories have a lead actress, and I felt 16 years old in the best possible way. That should have been the moment we met. Any normal person would have just walked upstairs and knocked. But the next note answered the question I hadn't asked, and it stopped me cold. Before you do the thing you're thinking about doing coming up to knock, I have to tell you something, and I'd rather tell it on paper because I'm a coward about it. I don't talk right now. I had surgery 3 months ago. Thyroid. They got the cancer, all of it. I'm okay, I promise. But a nerve got nicked and my voice is gone for now. Could come back in a few months. Could come back partway. Might not come all the way back at all. So the notes aren't a cute idea. They're how I talk to anyone. You're just the first person in a long time I actually wanted to talk to. I read it standing very still. I thought about all those late nights I'd heard the piano through the floor and never the sound of her singing along, even though it was the kind of music you'd want to sing along to. I thought about how she'd said, weeks ago, "I think I miss being interrupted more than I miss talking," and I'd thought it was poetic. It wasn't poetic. It was a woman, living inside, a silence she didn't choose, the way I'd been living inside one I had. I wrote back the truest thing I had. "Iris, you don't have to perform being okay for me. I'm fluent in pretending to be fine. I've got 2 years of it. You don't have to do that here. And for what it's worth, I'd rather read you than hear almost anybody else. The notes aren't a backup plan. They're the best part of my day." I almost added, "Can I meet you?" But I didn't. Because she'd called herself a coward, and I understood that she was telling me she wasn't ready, and the kindest thing I could do was let her decide the pace. I'd lost someone by not being there in time. I wasn't going to rush a person who'd just been through hell and back. So I waited, and the notes got deeper. That was when it stopped being charming and started being real. There's a difference, and I think you know it. Charming is easy. Real costs you something. She started telling me things about growing up the only quiet kid in a loud family, the one everyone talked over, until she just stopped trying to be heard. About how she'd become a children's librarian precisely because story time meant her job was to be the one voice in a room full of small people who actually listened, and how cruel it was that the universe took that voice of all the voices it could have taken. She wrote, "I used to do all the dragons in different growls. The kids would lose their minds. I keep thinking about those dragons. I don't know how to be a librarian who can't roar." I told her things too. Things I hadn't said out loud to a single living person. About Caleb. About the guardrail. About how I'd answered the phone that night already knowing, the way you sometimes know, and how I'd kept that voicemail he left me the week before and never listened to it because as long as I didn't, there was one piece of him I hadn't used up yet. I'd never told anyone that. I told a woman through a brass mailbox at 6 in the morning. She wrote back, "Don't listen to it until you want to hear him say hello. Not until you're trying to say goodbye. You'll know the difference. There's no rush. He's not going anywhere now. That's the only mercy in it." I sat down on the bottom stair and put my head in my hands, and I cried for the first time since the funeral. 2 years. A stranger I'd never seen reached through a wall and undid the knot I'd been carrying around in my chest like it was furniture. That's the thing nobody tells you about falling for someone through words. You fall for who they actually are, because words are where people keep themselves. I didn't know what Iris looked like. I knew what she'd do if she found a plant everyone had given up on. I knew she'd vote to make Bad Tuesdays illegal. I knew she'd tell a grieving man to wait for hello instead of goodbye. I was so far gone I didn't even recognize the country I was in anymore. I started leaving her things, not just notes. A paperback I thought she'd like, with a note marking the page where the dragon finally speaks. A coffee from the place on the corner, the good one, left on her box ledge with 4 on the lid. A pressed leaf I found that was such an absurd, perfect red, I couldn't throw it away. She left me a drawing once. She was a better artist than she let on a quick ink sketch of the crow from Unit 1 mid-strut, with a bottle cap in its beak and an expression of complete dignity. On the back, he let me close enough to draw him today. Took 2 months. Some friendships are slow. The good ones usually are. I pinned it above my desk at the studio. Priya saw it and said, "Theo, who is she?" Not even a question. A verdict. I said, "I don't know yet." And I meant it in more ways than one. Here's the part I'm not proud of. I was a coward too. Because there came a point, I'd guess about week 10, where I could have changed everything by simply climbing 1 flight of stairs. I knew it. She probably knew it. We were 2 people standing on either side of a door we both wanted to open, each waiting for the other to do it, each telling ourselves we were being respectful when really, we were just scared. Scared the magic was made of distance. Scared that in person we'd be clumsy and ordinary, and the words would dry up. Scared, most of all, of wanting something this much again, because the last thing I'd let myself want this much had ended on a wet road with a guardrail. So I kept it on paper. And I told myself paper was enough. It wasn't. But I told myself that. Then came the morning the note wasn't there. I want you to understand how wrong it felt. By then, the note under my box was as reliable as sunrise. 11 weeks, 70-some mornings. I came down the crooked stairs in my socks like I did every day, half asleep, already smiling before I'd even looked. Because that's what 11 weeks of small joy does to a person. It teaches your face to get ready in advance. And the ledge was empty. I stood there. I lifted the corner of my mailbox like maybe it had slid further under. Nothing. I checked the floor, in case it had fallen. Nothing. And that's when it hit me, standing in my socks on cold tile, this wave of pure animal fear, because I realized I knew exactly what was supposed to be there. I knew the weight of it, the fold, the little 4 she'd write so casually now it was practically a signature. I had memorized her handwriting so completely that its absence was as loud as a scream. I went up the stairs 2 at a time. 4th floor, corner unit. The door I'd never knocked on in all those weeks of letting her keep the distance. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again, harder, and called out Iris. Iris. It's Theo feeling absurd, because of course she couldn't call back even if she was standing right behind it. I pressed my ear to the wood. No piano, no movement. Just that terrible household silence that's different from quiet, the kind that means something is wrong. And I thought, God help me, I thought of Caleb, of how I'd known and still hadn't been able to get there in time. I was not doing that again. Not to someone I didn't even let myself finish the sentence. I just moved. I had the master keys. I'm the building manager. I had every right and every reason. I got the door open and went in. The apartment was beautiful in the way a person's real life is beautiful: books in stacks instead of shelves, plants in every window, an upright piano with sheet music open on the stand, a wall of children's drawings she must have kept from story times in another life. And on the floor by the kitchen, a chair tipped over and a step stool, and Iris. She was conscious. That was the first mercy. She was sitting on the floor with her back against the cabinets, her face gray-white, one hand pressed flat to her chest like she was trying to hold her own heart in place. There was a broken bowl beside her and a chair she'd clearly gone down with. She looked up at me and her eyes went huge and her mouth moved and nothing came out, and she made a small, helpless gesture at her own throat. I can't tell you, and I have never in my life crossed a room faster. I got down on the floor with her. I didn't grab her, didn't loom. I just got level with her face so she could see me. Hey, I'm here. You're okay. I've got you. Don't try to talk. She grabbed my sleeve. The same hand that had written me 70 notes. She was shaking. She pointed at her chest, then mimed a fast fluttering with her fingers racing, and then at the counter, where a pill bottle sat next to her phone, the screen still showing a half-typed message to 911 she hadn't been able to finish sending. Her heart. A complication from the surgery. It turned out later, her thyroid levels had crashed. Her pulse had gone wild. She'd gotten dizzy, reaching for something, and the chair had gone out from under her, and she'd been on that floor for 20 minutes, unable to call out, unable to speak a single word into a phone. While one floor down, a man who'd memorized her handwriting walked past her empty mailbox and kept going for 10 whole seconds before he understood. I finished the call. I held her hand the entire time. She wrote on the back of an envelope with a shaking hand, "Don't leave," and underlined it twice, dark and certain, the way she pressed on the words that mattered. I didn't leave. I rode in the ambulance. I sat in the molded plastic chair in the ER hallway and held that envelope that said, "Don't leave," and I didn't. She was okay. I need you to know that, because I was terrified for a while that I'd waited too long to climb one flight of stairs, and it would cost me everything, the way waiting had cost me before. But she was okay. They stabilized her, adjusted her medication, kept her 2 nights for monitoring. The complication was scary but treatable, the kind of thing that gets fixed and then becomes a story you tell. And on the first night, when the doctors had gone and the lights had dimmed, and it was just the 2 of us in a quiet room with a machine counting her heartbeats out loud, she pulled the little whiteboard the nurse had left toward her and wrote, "You came up. Your note wasn't there," I said. 11 weeks. I knew the second I saw the empty box. I can't explain it. I just knew. She wrote, "I've been trying to make myself knock on your door for a month. I kept chickening out. I was so scared the real me would disappoint the paper me. Iris." I pulled my chair closer. I fell for the real you. I just had to read her first. The paper was never the point. You were the point. From the headlights. From the very first stupid note about my battery. Her eyes filled. She wiped at them, annoyed at herself, and wrote fast. "I'm a mess. I'm a librarian who can't talk, who just fell off a chair and ruined a perfectly good bowl. This is not the meet cute I would have written." I laughed, and so did she silently, her whole face doing it, her shoulders shaking, which I realized was what her laugh looked like now, and I thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. For the record, I said, "I think the meet cute was 11 weeks ago. This is just the part where I finally show up. I'm sorry I'm late. I have a documented problem with showing up late to the things that matter. I'm working on it." She held my gaze for a long moment. Then she reached out and took my hand, not to write anything, just to hold it, and we sat there in the blue light, with her heartbeat ticking steady on the monitor, and neither of us needed a single word. I'd love to tell you that her voice came back the next morning and she said something perfect, and we kissed under a sunset. Life isn't a YouTube thumbnail. It came back slow. She got out of the hospital. I drove her home, and I carried her bags up the 4 flights, and at her door she wrote on the whiteboard she'd started carrying everywhere, "Stay for tea." I'm not ready for the day with you in it to be over. I stayed. I stayed until 2 in the morning, and we wrote to each other across her kitchen table, even though we were right there in the same room, because old habits are gentle habits, and because there was something I never wanted to lose about reading her, watching her decide her words, watching her press hard on the ones that mattered. That night, at the door, with the whiteboard set aside, she stood very close to me, closer than the paper had ever let us be. I could see the faint scar at the base of her throat, the freckle under her left eye, the exact brown of the eyes I'd spent 11 weeks imagining. And she lifted her hand and touched my jaw, just lightly, asking a question without any letters at all. I answered it. I kissed her. Slow, careful, the kind of kiss that isn't a beginning so much as a thing that was always going to happen, finally being allowed to. When we pulled apart, she was crying and smiling at the same time, and she didn't reach for the whiteboard. She just put her forehead against my chest and let me hold her, and I felt her breathe, and that was the whole conversation. We took it slow after that, which is the only way I know how to do something I'm afraid to lose. We had breakfast where I did most of the talking, and she did most of the noticing, which turned out to be the perfect division of labor. I learned her silences the way I'd learned her handwriting. The comfortable one, the thinking one, the one that meant I'm scared but I'm staying. I went to her speech therapy appointments. I sat in the waiting room and held the envelope that said, "Don't leave," which I'd kept, and which I still keep. I finally listened to Caleb's voicemail too. She was right. The day I wanted to hear him say hello instead of trying to say goodbye, I knew. Iris sat next to me while I did it. He just said, "Hey, it's me. Call me back. I've got a stupid idea I need to run by you. That's all. 11 seconds. I'd been saving it for 2 years, and it was just my brother, alive and dumb and loving me in the ordinary way, and I cried, and Iris held my hand and didn't say a word because she couldn't, and it was exactly the right amount of words. Her voice came back in pieces over the next 5 months. First a whisper, then a rasp. Then, one ordinary Sunday morning 11 months, almost to the day after the first note about my headlights, I came down the crooked stairs in my socks, and Iris was standing at the mailboxes in her pajamas, waiting for me, holding a folded note with a 2 on it. She didn't hand it to me. Instead, she looked at me, and she took a breath, and in a voice rough as gravel and soft as anything I've ever heard, she said the first full sentence I ever heard her speak out loud. She said, "You left your headlights on." I hadn't. Of course I hadn't. It was the first thing she'd ever written to me, said back to me with her own returning voice, and I understood it was the only way she could find to say I love you. This is where we started. I would do all of it again. I crossed that hallway for the last time as a man who didn't have her, and I kissed her at the bottom of the stairs while the crow from Unit 1 watched from the windowsill with complete dignity. We've been together 3 years now. She got her roar back not all the way. It cracks when she's tired. It disappears entirely when she's been talking too long. But the kids at the library? They think the dragon, who sometimes loses her voice mid-story, is the best dragon there's ever been, because she taught them that a voice going quiet doesn't mean a story stops. It just means you lean in closer. We still leave each other notes, every morning, every night. Even living in the same apartment now, even with her voice mostly back, there's a brass box in our entryway. I unscrewed it from the old building and brought it with us, which the new landlord found very strange, and there's always something folded inside with a number on it. Because the notes were never the backup plan. They were where we learned each other. They were the truest version of falling in love I've ever heard of, word by word, with nothing to go on, but who a person actually is. I memorized her handwriting before I ever heard her voice, and it turned out the handwriting and the voice and the woman were all telling me the same thing the whole time. I was just slow to come up the stairs and read it. So let me ask you, what would you have done if a stranger started leaving notes in your mailbox every morning, small, kind, noticing things, and you found yourself looking forward to it more than anything else in your day? Would you have climbed the stairs sooner than I did? Or would you have been a coward like me, terrified the magic was made of distance? And have you ever fallen for someone through their words before you ever really saw them, gotten to know who a person is on the inside before you knew a single ordinary thing about the outside? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. If this one stayed with you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.